Okay. I don't know. In this issue, we're on page 99 or 98, beginning of the Shemona Esrei. So yesterday we did 3 words plus the introductory verse. Now, yeah.
Yes, I wanted to see, I ask,
Yeah.
I've seen some Siddurim that do have, like, when we read the name, but we see, like, inside the second hey, like, written, like, the name Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, like that.
So in Sephardi Siddurim or some Kabbalistic Siddurim, we said at the beginning that there are different names of Hashem, and when we're not saying the actual words in the verse, we usually say Hashem, and we don't distinguish which names they are, and really it's very important to distinguish which names they are, and sometimes the names are understood as combinations, or what we say are understood as combinations. Now I pointed out to you that when you have the letters Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, that name with those letters, we don't pronounce it in terms of those letters. We pronounce it the same way we pronounce Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. That's because the real pronunciation of those 4 letters, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, is a long, complicated combination, which only the Kohanim used to say, only in the Beis HaMikdash, and is filled with deep Kabbalistic content. So what we're doing is we're reading the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, but pronouncing the other name. So what we're doing when we do our performance is really a combination of the 2 names. And this combination lowers the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. It lowers it, because it doesn't give it its own full expression. And therefore Chazal say that in the future, when the Mashiach comes, Kishem sheni nichtav ani nikra, just as I am written, so I will be read. And that time, the reading of Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey will be in terms of Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, and not Aleph Dalet Nun Yud the way we do it. And that'll be a much higher level. We don't do that. So I think what you have there in the Sephardi Siddur is to tell you, yes, you're looking at a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, but realize that for us, we don't have that really. We have the letters, but we don't say them. We say something else. Yeah.
I read, I think in Faith and Folly, that I read it before, it said something along the lines of that maybe some people know nowadays the names, it's just hidden. It's like very few people know the names, how to pronounce them, whatever, 42-letter names, something like that.
Yeah, I remember when my oldest daughter was, I think she was 6 years old, she asked my wife and me, does our Rebbe have Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit? So we said, let's go ask him. So we did. And he said, I'll only tell you this. Someone who says he has it does not have it. That's all. So he wasn't going to say he has it. That doesn't mean he does or he doesn't. I believe he did, but that's another story. So I think there are definitely people who know things that they don't publicize, and the extent to which we have, there are people who know and just don't talk about it. It's hard to know because they don't talk about it. So it could be true. I wouldn't deny it, but I wouldn't assert it either because I have no way of knowing.
Some people know what to pronounce the Vav and the Hey.
I have no idea. Maybe there are, maybe there aren't. I have no idea. Okay, now the next 2 phrases, they go hand in hand, but they mean different things. One is Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, our God and the God of our fathers. And after that is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And putting the 2 phrases together raises at least 2 questions. First of all, if you say our God and God of our fathers, you could wonder about the order. Why would you put it in anti-chronological order? Why not start with them and then move to us? And number 2, was there some question who our fathers might be? And that's why you have to list them, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And if you're going to list them anyhow, then don't say our fathers. It's redundant because we know who our fathers are, and you're listing them. So why say it twice? And of course, the answer is that different things are being said. It's not a question of informing us as to who our fathers are, but different points are being made. So now I'll just teach you a piece of Jewish logic. Our Father and our God and the God of our fathers. So you ask, well, why is it in that order? And somebody says, Rabbi, I know the answer to that question. Take a look on page 79. It says, about 8 lines down, the end of the line, this is my God, and I will build him a sanctuary, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. There you are, Rabbi. Right there in a verse written by the Creator himself. Say my Father first, and the God of my Father second. Right? What's the Jew going to say back to that? Why is it written that way in the verse? That doesn't answer your question as to why you should put the present before the past. It may be a proof that it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't answer the question why it's done that way. I think I've mentioned to some of you in the past, but maybe it's worth repeating just as a piece of logic. There's a big difference between a proof and an explanation. A proof and an explanation. Very often in life, and very often in science, you can prove that something's true, but you don't know why that is. In fact, a great deal of investigation in science is, we know that's what happens, but why does it happen? So, if you're exploring something, you may get a proof that the picture you have is a right picture, but you still want to know why it's a right picture. So at best, this verse could explain where the rabbis were coming from when they made the text of the prayer, and it's a right text, but it doesn't explain what it means. So one explanation, and as I have told you at the beginning, there are many explanations for these things. One explanation is this. Imagine that it had said the opposite. Imagine it had said it in chronological order. God of my fathers, and my God. You might have thought that he's my God because he's the God of my father. You might have thought he's my God because I'm a continuation of my father. I'm born into the status. And what we want to do is to avoid that understanding, that I'm here because I was born into it, or only because I was born into it. An example that I give is this. In feudal times, there were lords with a little L, and there were their serfs. A serf really belonged to the Lord. And his children belonged to the Lord. And there were free people also. Not everybody was born a serf. If you wanted to take your chance against the roving bands of robbers and militias that roamed the countryside and stole, you could do that. If you became a serf of a particular lord, he had his own army. And he would protect you from the robbers, and you paid him a certain share of your crop for the protection. Sometimes the lords took advantage of their positions, and sometimes they didn't. Well, let's imagine George is a free man, and he's struggling, and he's being plundered by the robbers, and he comes to the local lord and says, listen, I can't take it anymore. I can't stay alone. I want to become your serf. And the Lord accepts him, and they set up the deal. Years go by, and the Lord, in fact, is just and kind and considerate. He has a very good relationship with him. And then he has a child. And the child was born a serf. That was the law of serfdom. But the child also appreciates the Lord. And one day he asks for permission to speak to the Lord. He says, my father joined you as a serf. I was born under your control, and I'm a serf because the law requires it. But I want you to know that even if I hadn't been born a serf, I would have done what my father did. My father was right. He did something very good by becoming your servant, and I would have done it as well. What is the son saying? The son is saying, if I don't make this statement, it could be understood that I'm a servant because the law says so. I was born into serfdom, and that's where I am. I'm not rebellious. I'm not going to rebel against the law. But I wanted to be clear that that's not true. I'm not here just because the law requires it. I'm here because I appreciate what you are. So if we said, God of my fathers and my God, it could be understood, he's the God of my fathers. My father's pledged allegiance. I'm born into it. I'm obligated to do it, and I'm doing it. No, it's not true. I mean, it's true, but that's not the sole reason I'm here. Even if I weren't born into it, I would volunteer for it because I appreciate it on my own. God is my Father and the God of my fathers. God is my God and the God of my fathers. Okay, is that clear?
Somebody is intellectually honest, let's say, who holds it, maybe wouldn't say Nasa.
Oh, so this is a very important question. It's a very general question about faith. It says, okay, I hear the idealism in the words, but I can't really say them honestly because I don't feel that way. I'm going to teach you something about honesty. This question usually is raised further on in the field where we pray for the restoration of the temple. And I often have students, especially new students, who say, Rabbi, animal sacrifices? Rabbi, I just, I don't identify with that. How can I ask God for animal sacrifices if I don't feel it, I don't see it, and I certainly wouldn't volunteer for it. So here's my parable. You go to the doctor, and the doctor checks your general health, and he says, listen, you have a certain condition. It's not terrible, and we have a medication for it, but it'll be good for you to take the medication. I'll give you a prescription. Go to the pharmacy, get it, take one a day. Okay, he's your doctor, he's trustworthy. Go to the pharmacy. Give the pharmacist the prescription. The pharmacist says, oh, yeah, we have this stuff. I'll give it to you. But let me ask you a question. Do you really want this stuff? Are you really asking for it? Are you honest and sincere in asking for it? Am I honest and sincere in asking for it? Do I know what the condition is? It was a 13-syllable Latin name. No, I do not what it is. Do I know what's in these pills? No. Do I know the studies that have been done to prove that these pills will help for that condition? No. So am I dishonest in asking for the medication? I don't think so. My doctor, whom I trust, tells me that this is good for me. I don't have to be able to testify on the basis of my own knowledge and understanding that it's good for me. If I receive it from someone who has credibility to tell me that it's good for me, so I'm not dishonest, I'm not deceiving anyone if I say I want it. I do want it because the doctor told me I need it. So here too, I say, well, I'm asking for animal sacrifices. Am I perhaps dishonest in asking if I personally don't feel committed to them? I can say, I don't feel committed to them, but people with great credibility told me that I need them. That's what he told me. After all, I'm not attached to the pill in the pill box either. Not attached to the pill. The doctor told me I need it, so I take it. So I'm asking on the basis of the credibility of those who have credibility to tell me what the world is really like. Same thing is true here. When I say God is my Father, is my God and the God of my Father, that's the condition that a Jew should be in. It's a condition that is appropriate to be in. I agree that it's appropriate. I agree that I should be in that position. Usually I'm in that position to some extent, but I realize that I should increase the extent. That means I'm taking them at their credibility that this is what the situation should be. That's what I say. So it's not dishonest. It's not dependent upon my feelings. Now, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. So first of all, I asked, once you have the God of our fathers, why isn't this redundant? The question can be multiplied. Why does it say God of 3 times? You'll tell me, oh, Rabbi, that's a quote from the Torah, to what's written in the Siddur. That's true, but there are other quotes from the same Torah which say God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And don't repeat God of. So saying that's a quote from the Torah doesn't answer my question. Why not take the other quote and put it in here? And the prayer here is expressing something that's extremely, extremely important. You have a relationship between two people. The flavor of the relationship is going to depend upon the two people. Now let's suppose you have one person who has multiple relationships. Well, he's common to all the relationships, but the other party in each case is different. And therefore the quality of the relationships is not going to be identical. Now let's take an easy case. Let's say a father with 3 children. So it's the same father, but the children are different, and the relationship is going to be different in each case. So when we say if we said God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you could have thought that God is who he is, and he requires and supports a certain type of relationship, and each of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had that relationship. But we don't say that. We say God of Abraham, and God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. That means that they had different relationships. Because the person in each case is different, the quality of the relationship is different. And that means since every person is unique, the relationship that people have with God is going to be different. And that means when you read about great people, first of all, if you read about a variety of great people, you'll see this right away. Because different great people had different relationships with God. But when you read about it and you compare them with your life, you don't say, well, there's something wrong with me because I don't have his relationship with God. Maybe not. You're going to have to craft your own relationship with God. And in certain respects, it's going to be unique to you. It can't be a rubber stamp of someone else. Choni Amagal asked for rain. And there was a drought, and Choni Amagal drew a circle in the dirt on the ground. That's why he's called Choni, the circler. He drew a circle and he said to God, I'm not moving out of the circle till you give rain. Wow, isn't that a very humble request? Isn't that, self-effacing? Please, Ribono Shel Olam, help us. No, give! I'm not moving till you give. And then the rain came down, little tip, 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 tip. So he said, I didn't ask for rain like that. I asked for real rain. So it came down like a flood. He said, I didn't ask for a destructive rain. Make it a moderate rain. So rain came down as a moderate rain. So one of the other Tanoim heard what he did. He said to him, if you weren't who you are, I would have put you in cherem. I would have put you in excommunication. What a chutzpah thing to do. How can you behave to God with such chutzpah? But, he said, you're like a child who's interacting with his father. Children can get away with a lot, especially young children. So, me, I would never do. If I did what you did, I'd be wiped out. Because I'm like a prime minister to a king. Prime minister comes during the hours of consultation. He can't just barge in. And he certainly can't make demands but you're like a child and you can do it. Now this is a graphic illustration of the fact that different people have a different kind of relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So what we're being reminded here is that it's one of the great spiritual tasks of life, and it's not something you finish when you're 27 and you say, oh, now I've done it, onto the stock market. It's a lifelong thing because you change, your circumstances change, and it's a lifelong continually adjusted to your relationship with God, and you have to know that you can take inspiration from others. It's a little bit like getting a palette with colors. Maybe every artist starts off with the same palette, but they paint very different pictures, and then very different combinations of colors, which means that they make different and unique hues of color. So that's one of the things that we learn from this. Yes.
I mean, they're mentioning the individual ways in which there's a relationship between Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But I mean, we've said it before, but the way we say the very first word after Hashem's name, it's Elokeinu, which is a plural. Like it has a quality of our.
Oh, that's a different thing. That's because all the prayers are in the plural, because you're standing there primarily as a Jew, and praying on behalf of the Jewish people. And in fact, when we come to our individual needs, the individual needs are always referenced under the general title of the Jewish people. So he said, Rebbe Shalom, the Jewish people needs health and needs curing, rehabilitation for disease. And I'm also a Jew and I have this disease and I'm asking you to help me as well. But I always ask, for myself as one of the Jews who's standing before you. That's all. No more than that. So the plural is because of who's doing the davening. That's the idea there. And you can, as I say, you can mention yourself when it fits you individually. You add in for me also. Okay. So, as we have said. As we have said many times, we know the relationships that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had. Avraham being loving kindness, Yitzchak being strict justice, so to speak, and Yaakov being a certain combination. I want to share with you now something that I discovered very recently. I don't know if I have full grasp of it, but I think it's quite important. The next word, which is a name of God other than the formula name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is in all the blessings, beginning and the end, Hakel, Aleph Lamed. I've noticed recently that name plays a very central role. And it plays a role at the beginning of a long sequence and repeats. Let me show you a few examples. I don't know why I suddenly started paying attention to this. But take a look on page 83. Now just look at this. This is the end just before Baruch Hu. Yishtabach Shem Kol Ad Malkeinu. Your name should be praised forever. Hakel, Aleph Lamed. Now I have a long text. I mean, what is he? What's going on here? Malkeinu. Yeah, they write the God, G-O-D. But unfortunately, sometimes they write G-O-D for Elohim, and that's not the same name at all. So let's just call it Aleph Lamed. I'll read it in English and I'll tell you where it comes in. Great and God, Holy King, heaven and earth, because you is fitting, Hashem our God, the God of our forefathers. That's not Kale. Song of praise, lauding hymns, power and dominion, triumph, greatness, strength, praise, splendor, holiness and sovereignty, blessing and thanksgiving, this time forever, forever. Now we come to the closing. Blessed are you, Hashem, Kale, Aleph Lamed, again. So the early on in the beginning of the blessing, you have Aleph Lamed. Now you have Baruch Atah Hashem, Aleph Lamed. King, great in praise, Aleph Lamed, of acknowledgments, master of wonders, who chooses the songs of praise, King, Aleph Lamed, the life of the world. The single name that appears there most often is Aleph Lamed. So, okay. So now let me show you something else. Shabbos morning, in the Psalms that we say, now this is, what is this, Ashkenaz or Sfar? This one is Ashkenaz, okay. Here we go. For this one I think is very, you have a different. Second. Read. You don't say it? Wait a second. Huh. You don't say that. Oh?
Should I get the
1 second. No, here it is. I could put it. 178.
1? So night Shabbat.
Yeah. So it sounds like this. A prayer by Moses, the man of God, my Lord, an abode you have been for us in all generations, before the mountains, before born, before you had not been fashioned the earth, habit the land, and from this world to the next world, the world to come, you are Aleph Lamed. So that's the introduction of the content of this psalm, and the title that he gets here is Aleph Lamed. Now comes a long section of God's justice and man's finitude and death and destruction and so forth and so on. You reduce man to pulp and you say, repent, sons of man, for 1,000 years in your eyes and but a bygone yesterday, like a watch of the night. You flood them away, they become sheep-like. By morning they are like grass and that withers. In the morning it blossoms and rejuvenated. By evening it is cut down and brittle. For we are consumed by your fury. We are confounded by your wrath. You have set our iniquities before yourself, our immaturity before the light of your countenance. For all our days pass by because of your anger. We're consumed. Our years are like a fleeting thought. Days of years among them are 70 years. The strength 80 years. Their proudest success is but page doesn't turn. Is but is say why I misread them. Is but toil and pain, for as cut off swiftly we fly away. Who knows the power of your fury? As you are feared, so is your anger, according to the count of our days. Now, that's really pretty bitter, pretty drastic, pretty solemn, pretty, very destructive. And then we say, according to the count of our days, so may you teach us. Then we shall acquire a heart of wisdom. Return, Hashem, how long? Relent concerning your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your kindness. We shall sing out and rejoice throughout your days. Gladden us when the days you afflicted us, the years which we saw evil. May your works be visible to your servants. Wow! Everything is going to be good. Everything is going to be wonderful. There are more examples, but let me tell you something. Aleph Lamed, in our literature, is a name of loving kindness. Now you'll tell me, wait a minute, Rabbi, you told us 16 times already that chesed is the word for loving kindness. It is. Aleph Lamed is for great loving kindness. Great. Not just ordinary, regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill, but for great loving kindness. By the way, you have this in Nishmas also. You can look it up. Nishmas also, we have the same thing where Kale introduces whole long passages. So I think the idea here is this. In this particular psalm, you're going to talk about some pretty devastating, drastic, strict judgment and punishment and consumption, everything else. Don't forget where it's coming from. Don't forget where it's coming from. It's coming from Aleph Lamed, which stands for great loving kindness. And that's why, at the end of the psalm, there's a rehabilitation. Because all of this was really a strategy whereby Aleph Lamed could deliver the great loving kindness that it wants to deliver. Kale leads the discussion because that's the source from which everything comes. For those who know a little bit about the terminology, in the 10 spheros, you have chesed. Chesed is really number 4 if you're coming down, depending on how you count. The top one is keser. And this, I think Aleph Lamed is associated with keser. Aleph Lamed is the great loving kindness out of which everything comes. Chesed is right and din is left, Gvur is left. They're on a par. They're in that respect they're equal. They're co-equal and they play off one another. They're joined in Yaakov, which is Tiferes, which is a combination of the two of them. But Keser stands in the middle at the top, alone, operating alone. And it produces everything that comes after it. And it's great loving kindness. So I think that's the emphasis in Yishtabach, and you have to pay attention that name is a very important name. So here too, in the Shemona Esrei, where we are, you start off with the Yud Kei Vav Kei, you start off with relational terms. Our King. I'm sorry, Shemona Esrei. Our God, and God of our fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, those are all relational. And then you come to Kel. Aleph Lamed. And the phrase is Kel Elyon, the high Kel. So, first of all, in terms of the structure that I mentioned, it makes a lot of sense because Kesed stands at the top of the whole structure. And if you thought that Kel and Chesed are related, but Kel is related, but it's distinct and superior to Chesed. Right? Chesed's coming up. Gomel Chasadim Tovim, B'Konei Hakol. But Kel Elyon is higher than that. And some of the commentators say that the word Elyon here, high up, means to connote something else. We have lots of descriptions of God in this blessing, and we have descriptions of what He does. You have to be reminded that all the descriptions are superficial. None of the descriptions touch what He is. They don't touch His essence. According to Maimonides, I've quoted now at least 47 times that we describe what He does, not what He is. So Kel Elyon is telling you that there's something beyond all your descriptions. Now, we use a name for the word of God, which connotes Chasadim Gedolim, great loving kindness, but that's the expression of that Elyon, of that unknown. The expression of it is Kel, because that's the highest. And according to the Kabbalistic literature, we talk about Keser. Keser is something which is also only indirectly and partially describable. And the way they put it is this: a world, in the Kabbalistic picture, is given the structure of a human being. Now, the crown on your head isn't part of what you are. It's not part of your body. It sits on your head. So too, the Keser of a world sits on the world. It's not totally part of the world. And our ability to deal with the world is from this level 2, which is Chokhmah, on down. Even Chokhmah, our ability to deal with it is only partial, but our ability to deal with it is from Chokhmah on down. Keser is something which we know is there, but it's very difficult to deal with. And if you want a contemporary scientific analogy, think of dark matter. Dark matter is there because of its effect on the way stars move, especially in galaxies. We have no clue what it is. We have no clue what it's made of. We have no clue how it's constructed. No clues of what its own laws are. We just know that it exerts a gravitational pull on other matter, but beyond that, we have no clue what it is. So a little bit like the way we, at least in this present point of science, relate to dark matter, and the same is true for dark energy, for those who know what those things are. Keser is a little bit like that. So Kel Elyon is a name for this higher element, which is really not part and parcel of the interacting features of our world the way the rest of the features are, and its expression in activity for the world is chesed, like lahavdil, the expression of dark matter's activity in the world is gravitational pull. But that's all. And what it is in and of itself, we haven't a clue. It's beyond us. So this is put in here in part because you're talking in blessing where there are lots of descriptions of God. You have to be reminded what the status is of the descriptions of God. So, the Aleph Lamed. Now, Godol, Gibor, and Nora. So, Gibor and Nora, which are translated as mighty and awesome, of the first of the next levels of the Kabbalistic structure are well known, and Godol is in the place where Kesed belongs, and according to our literature, the word Godol refers to the characteristic of chesed, at least sometimes, of loving kindness. Indeed, when the Jews, I think this is at the spies, so when Moses prays for them, Yigdal Noach, Kosh Baruch Hu should be Gottleib, meaning he should forgive them. He should treat them with chesed, with loving kindness. Question is, why would the word gadol be used to connote loving kindness? I suppose there are lots of explanations of this. I have an explanation that's comes from my background, but like always, I would say ask other people for other explanations. Let's think. Big is a doubly relative term. First of all, you say, I got X, which is big. You'll ask, a big what? If it's a big ant or it's a big elephant, that makes a big difference. You just say it's big, and then give me a clue, what its size is. I don't know what category it belongs to, number one. And number two, when you say a big elephant, that's in comparison to other elephants. If there were only one elephant, you wouldn't call it a big elephant. It just is what it is. So big is a comparative term. When Jacob and Esau meet, and Jacob wants to give Esau a gift, and Esau is pretending he doesn't want to take the gift. So Esau says to Jacob, Yesh li Rav, my brother, I have a lot. So I don't need what you're offering me. A lot is comparative. If everybody had the same, you wouldn't say I have a lot. What does Jacob answer back? Yesh li kol, I have everything. Really? You don't have what I have, Jacob. Come on, you don't have everything. He means I have everything I need. That's absolute. Not in comparison to somebody else. So now, we're using the word gadol, which is comparative of God. That's a gigantic step down. I'm just referring to God in a way that compares him with other things and indicates that he's greater or bigger than other things. Let's see, is there any concept, any absolute concept, non-comparative, for which you could use the word gadol? Maybe we'll stretch a little bit. Well, let's imagine something that's growing. And it's going to continue growing without end. What Aristotle called the potential infinity. It will pass any limit you set. At any time you check it, it's only a finite size, but it's growing. And it's not going to stop growing. Suppose you call that big. Well, calling that big isn't in comparison to something else, because it's going to infinitely outstrip everything else. It's going to outstrip other things unlimitedly. Maybe that's a kind of bigness that's not just comparative. Would that be associated with God in any way? Well, God's plan for the world is that at a certain point we shift into a different stage of existence called Olam Haba, the world to come, and that world is eternal. That world is going to go on forever. It's going to get longer and longer and longer without end. And that world is where the loving kindness that he wants to bestow upon us, that's where we're going to get it. So his giving out, his outpouring of loving kindness is unending. So his loving kindness is big in that sort of absolute sense of not just 77 as compared to 40, but outstripping any finite limit. So maybe Gadol is related to Chesed, but it's Kosh Baruch Hu's Chesed, in a fairly intimate way. The absolute concept associated with Gadol does describe Hashem's Chesed, and I don't think it describes anything else. So to say that the word Gadol is a word that connoting Chesed is not a far jump, at least. And as I said, I'm sure there are other explanations as well. So now we say of God, of Aleph Lamed, who's, we say that he's Gadol, which is means Chesed, Gibor, mighty, and awesome. So Elyon comes after that. Now this is a trio of Kabbalistic ideas, which, as I said, we have explained many times. And we're taking now God's activity on a level that's expressed directly in our world. When you have the 10 spheros, so the top three are a backdrop to our world. They're not expressed directly in our world. They govern our world from a position that's above our world. That's why there are only 7 days of creation. And that's why 8 and 50 are numbers that always take you beyond the limitations of our world. 8 and 50 are numbers which connote something beyond our world, breaking into our world to have an effect. Again, somewhat like the dark energy, dark matter, which has a gravitational effect, but the rest of it is unknown. So here, these three are the top three of the bottom 7, where that we describe them and we classify events that take place according to them. There's something which is much more open to us to understand. Yeah.
Just, knowing how from which place Kel stands, so how do we know that we do manage to say the name and what's
I think it's typical when you use a name in any part of life. The name refers to something, but the something it refers to has an enormous amount of information of which you're unaware. Even this table, how old is it? Where was it manufactured? What exactly is it made out of? How long will it last? There's an enormous amount. How much did it cost? You see the table, you can identify it, but there's a lot you don't know about it. And you say, it's the name of a famous person, Donald Trump. So you know something about what he's done, but you probably don't know his childhood, you don't know how he grew up, you probably don't know the exact amount of his finances. Maybe nobody knows the exact amount of his finances, which is his business. So when you use a name, you realize that what you want the name for is to pick out that thing to talk about. But you acknowledge that you use the name in great ignorance of many features of the thing that has the name. The same thing is true here. You use a kale. I know I'm referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the point of view of his highest interaction with the world. And because it's his highest interaction with the world, we have very little grasp of its content, what it does. And the one thing that we do know about it is that its impact is great, very powerful loving kindness. But where it's going and how it's getting there and what the means and ends are and the relative priorities and so on, there's a great deal that we don't know. So we're using the name conscious of our ignorance of what it connotes and what it's the name of, but that doesn't stop us from using the name. You don't need a great deal of knowledge in order to use the name. You're on a tour of India, and you say to a local guide, "Take me to the Taj Mahal." And he says, "Really? What do you know about the Taj Mahal?" He said, "I know it's a place to go because my cousin told me." I don't know, maybe it's a waterfall, maybe it's a walrus, I don't know. He told me go see the Taj Mahal. I want to go to the Taj Mahal. He does want to go. He wants to go to the thing that has the title Taj Mahal. There was a case where they asked a child, "Do you know what cauliflower, turnips is?" He says, "Yeah, I know. What is it?" "It's the stuff in the can with TURNIPS on it." And it's true. You pick up a can with TURNIPS on it, and you've got a can of turnips, no question about it. Is it green or yellow? Is it alive? Is it frogs? I don't know. It's turnips. So we can use names with that kind of very superficial grasp. I think that's the point here. Okay. One last thing I'll tell you, and then we'll pick it up on Sunday. He presents, what does Saturday bestows, chasadim tovim, good loving kindnesses. Now, you're sitting in a yeshiva and you learned how to think about language. You immediately think, wow, good loving kindnesses. Are there bad loving kindnesses? Why do I need the qualification of good? Aren't loving kindnesses by definition good? And the answer is there is a type of goodness that not all loving kindnesses have, and that is that they are visibly loving kindness when you get them. We spoke the other day about hidden blessings, blessing in disguise. There, the event was something that really was good, but you didn't see it at the time. In many stories of people who missed planes that went down. And they had words with the cab driver for missing the plane, and 3 hours later they felt very differently about it. So here, this is talking about the loving kindnesses which show themselves, where you see that the loving kindness on the surface. The next blessing will be about the other kind. And since I mentioned this, I want to finish with a story which was very bitter and to teach us a lesson. This apparently took place in the 5 towns, that there was a quite wealthy man, a shul, and one morning he came into the synagogue late, and he was very upset. So the rabbi said to him, "What happened? Why are you so upset?" So he said, "I was invited to a business meeting in Europe, and there are going to be leaders of this area from all over the world, and important decisions are going to be made there, and they have to be signed. You have to be there. And I hired a driver, and he made mistakes to going to the vet, and we missed the plane. And that's it. I'm not going to be there." And I'm very upset. Okay, 6 hours later, it came out that the plane went down. So the guy comes to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, I could have been on that plane. If I had been on the plane, I'd be dead now. I want to make a sudas hodoya, a meal to give thanks to God that I wasn't on the plane." The rabbi said to him, "I see. In order for you to feel that what God is doing for you is good, 450 people have to die, right? That's the only way that you feel that what God is doing is good. Meditate on that. That's what it takes you to acknowledge that what God is doing is good." And the other story, which is a happy story, but also with a similar message, a guy comes into the rabbi, and he says, "Baruch Hashem, my wife gave birth to a son, and we're making a first child, and we're making a bris. And I want to ask the rabbi, does the meal have to be fleshik? Could the meal be milchik?" So the rabbi said, "Tell me something. If you had to wait 10 years for your first child, would you ask that question?" "Well, no, Rabbi. If I had to wait 10 years for a child, I guess I'd be so overwhelmed by it. Of course I would make a fleshik suda." So he says, "And here God gave you a child that didn't make you wait the 10 years. And you don't appreciate that?" It's a question of how you look at things and to understand what the alternatives are and how we should feel the sense of gratitude to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. Sometimes we're blasé about what happens because we don't appreciate what the alternatives could have been and what in fact actually happened. Okay, so Yez Hashem, we'll pick it up on Sunday.